The top of 6 o'clock, we continue following that breaking news involving Cuba, the end of the controversial wet foot, dry foot policy.
The Obama administration abruptly made the announcement more than an hour ago. Our senior political reporter Michael Putney joins us right now with what this all means.
Janine Calvin, it means the end of an immigration policy that has been in place for more than 20 years and under which hundreds of thousands of Cubans have arrived in the U.S. and been allowed to stay. The U.S. and Cuba agreed in 1995 that any Cuban who left the island by sea and who reached U.S. soil could stay and get automatic residency. Those who were picked up at sea by the Coast Guard were repatriated, that is, taken back to Cuba, where they sometimes were jailed or faced other punishment. And then there were, of course, the Cubans who were brought here by human smugglers, but even those Cubans were allowed to stay. Over the years, tens of thousands of Cubans reached U.S. shores, mainly Miami. Last year, the Coast Guard says about 7,400 Cubans either made it to the U.S. soil or were picked up at sea and then taken back. At ports of entry along the U.S.-Mexican border, last year, more than 41,000 Cubans showed up and were granted entry and permanent residency. Now, that is all over. It looks like Cubans will need a visa to enter the U.S. like any other immigrant. President Obama changed the policy by executive order today. The White House issued a statement from him a short time ago. And President Obama said in the statement, by taking this step, we are treating Cuban migrants the same way we treat migrants from other countries. Our Hatzel Vela is in Havana. He filed this story just minutes ago.
So we have been in the streets of Havana talking to folks about this major news coming out of Washington, but I can tell you a lot of them still just getting word of what's happening. A lot of them did see it, they tell me, on state-run television when we went to the streets in the streets of Havana. A lot of them shocked that this is happening, some saying this is good, some saying that this is bad. One woman told us that this is bad, especially for poor Cubans, but another man told us this is good, that it had to happen at some point.
Yeah, the Cubans won't be able to go over there anymore. None of them. If they go, they'll just be turned back.
To leave the country, you have to leave illegally. Every Cuban who leaves has to leave illegally. If not, it's too expensive.
This is a presidential decision, so we are going to be waiting and seeing what President-elect Trump does when it comes to wet foot, dry foot, because he might be able to reverse it and do something different than what President Obama has just done. Reporting in Havana, Cuba, Hatzel Vela, Local 10 News.
Hatzel, what a way for President Obama to leave office. 1 week from tomorrow, he ends wet foot, dry foot. We are in the newsroom this afternoon. Michael Putney, Local 10 News.
And from Hatzel in Cuba, we go live now to Local 10 News reporter Todd Tongan, standing by in Miami with reaction from the Cuban exile community. Todd.
Janine, what a difference in atmosphere today is from the day after Thanksgiving when the news of Castro's death came down. No pots and pans banging, no horns honking, and no big crowds gathering outside of Cafe Versailles. In fact, if you take a look around, there's probably a bigger media presence here than there is by Cuban-American protesters or supporters coming out to voice their opinion about President Obama's decision to suspend the wet foot, dry foot policy. In fact, I've spoken to at least half a dozen people here, and I was really quite surprised by the reaction and the opinions that we got.
I'm happy because the Cubans should stay in Cuba and fight to do away with the communist regime in Cuba and not come here and do nothing about it. And I know that they don't do nothing about it because it's been 58 years.
It's going to be good for the immigration of the United States because it's going to limit immigration. It's going to be bad for the Cuban people because they cannot come here at their will.
We spoke to a Bay of Pigs veteran who told me, he showed me his ring, and he told me, he said he thinks that this policy change is a good idea. He thinks it may spur change from within Cuba and make the Cuban people fight for their own freedom. At least at this point, we haven't heard anybody vocalizing any outrage that the president has suspended this policy, but there certainly seems to be quite a bit of interest here outside Cafe Versailles coming on to dinner time. In Little Havana, Todd Tongan, Local 10 News.